Welcome everyone to the UTC Advocacy Update. I'm Brett Kilbourne. With me is Eric Wagner and also Campbell Baskin. We're the legislative assistants at UTC. Together, we're going to be walking through the various different slides and issues very quickly in the interest of time. So in terms of the outline, we're going to cover spectrum issues. We're going to cover the broadband and energy provisions within the infrastructure bill. We'll talk a little bit about poll attachments, and then we'll round out talking about our PPD projects and call for papers for the 2022 annual conference, and then also the Public Policy Division resolutions that just got passed. With respect to the first item under spectrum, we want to talk about 6 gigahertz and provide a status update. Currently, there is an interference study that was submitted by Southern Company together with Lockard and White and Nappery, which shows that the interference is going to be much worse than what earlier models and earlier real world testing had indicated. There have been a couple of rebuttal ex partes that have been filed since that time. But we've gone to the FCC together with Southern Company to meet with the Office of Engineering and Technology and also the chairwoman's office. And thus far, we haven't heard any further response from the FCC about the interference study. So that has basically prompted us to consider filing a petition for rulemaking to move this process along and request that the FCC, at least with respect to low power indoor 6 gigahertz unlicensed devices, that it would go back and develop new rules that actually would address the interference we're seeing in these tests. That takes us to the AFC public notice. The FCC is considering adopting in its open commission meeting on September 30th. The AFC process public notice proposes that there be a deadline for AFC applications to be submitted by November 30th, and there would be a comment period following that, which would close on December 21st, after which time the FCC would review the proposals and the comments and then decide whether to grant the AFC proposal submissions. There will be a test process as well. So we're looking very closely at that to see if it's going to be an open and transparent test process. We also think it's kind of interesting that the FCC has declined to accept testing as part of the certification process for the equipment, but yet they're still allowing testing, presumably for AFC systems. It's a little odd. In terms of the litigation update, the oral arguments were held on September 13th, September 17th, and went very well for our side. We're waiting for the DC Circuit to actually come out with a decision at this point. We're expecting that it will at least remand, if not vacate, the FCC's report and order from 2020 based on the comments that were made by the judges during the oral arguments. Turning to the 4.9 gigahertz order on reconsideration and 8th further notice proposed rulemaking. The good news here is that this item that the FCC is considering taking up at its open commission meeting on September 30th would potentially allow for utilities to be able to share this spectrum with public safety entities who are already using the spectrum. So stay tuned on that one. We've been working on this for quite some time, and hopefully the FCC now will come out with a report and order that will support utility access to that band. Similarly, with respect to the IoT notice of inquiry, this is an item that the FCC is taking up at its open commission meeting on September 30th. This does provide an opportunity for utilities once again to, in the context of IoT, explain that utility smart grid networks do require additional spectrum to be able to meet those requirements as well. And that takes us to the broadband, energy, and water infrastructure provisions. I'll talk about broadband. Campbell's going to talk about energy. Quickly, there are broadband provisions that provide $65 billion in total for a variety of different types of broadband infrastructure programs, one of which includes $1 billion that's directed towards middle mile deployment. And that is something that would support a lot of these investor-owned utilities that are currently deploying broadband on a middle mile basis and allowing third parties to be able to provide finished retail services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Campbell, and he can talk about energy and state and local broadband issues.
Yeah, thank you, Brett. So currently with the energy provisions, there are $73 billion available for transmission distribution energy. One of the main foci of the infrastructure proposal has been on smart grid and making sure that smart grids are resilient, primarily resilient, especially when it comes to extreme weather. In terms of the transmission lines, they've definitely been more focused on weatherization of the transmission lines and the distribution lines. And specifically with regards to like pole attachments, they've definitely been trying to focus on just wanting to make sure they are resilient against extreme weather and flooding and climate change in particular. When it comes to the state and local broadband issues, the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed by Congress back in March, and it does provide $100 billion, the Treasury has issued its guidance for the states, and states have been deploying various broadband grant programs for utilities and other companies to deploy broadband. In terms of the NAIRC broadband provisions, EEI and UTC and other trade associations worked with NAIRC to pass their broadband resolution, focusing on utility broadband. Additionally, West Virginia and Virginia state governments also passed an approval of cost recovery by the IOUs. With that, Eric, can you take it away?
And I will. Thank you so much, Campbell. The FCC has a very busy September open meeting. One more document that they will be considering is the Resilience Network Notice for Proposed Rulemaking. And that is based on the recent experiences from Hurricane Ida, from the wildfires in the West, and also from the Valentine's Day ice storm in Texas. The main issue that the FCC has recorded there is that backup power is the main and leading issue that keeps the CMIS networks down and unavailable to to their subscribers. So they are asking whether those voluntary commitments that mobile providers have entered into most recently after the Superstorm Sandy should be codified so that they would be actually actually required to have these backup powers. And related to that is an issue that then would be for utilities to consider how can the utility companies, the power companies, be playing a role in providing coordination with the commercial providers and help them get their networks back up faster and more efficiently. So those are all questions that FCC will review in that NPRM if it is adopted, which we expect it will. So that brings us to pole attachments, and you will hear more from Brett on that. But a lot of this started in those petitions filed in 19 and 20 by CTIA, which is the Commercial Wireless Providers Association, and by NCTA, which is the Cable Company Association. So on the most recent developments, Brett will give us an update.
Sure. Thanks, Eric. And quite frankly, right now we're in a holding pattern. The FCC did address some of these requests in the petitions that NCTA and CTI filed, but there's still some remaining issues that are outstanding. So at this point, we have not heard anything from the FCC in terms of its posture towards those petitions, whether the FCC is going to come out with any further clarifications. What they have said so far basically is addressed some of the basic issues around assignment of costs with respect to pole replacements, and also where wireless attachments can be placed on poles, that kind of thing. But there are some more granular issues that could potentially affect utilities fairly significantly. So we'll keep you posted in terms of any further developments there. The other thing that's going on is there is a petition for declaratory ruling that the Edison Electric Institute filed, and we filed comments and reply comments in support of that petition. The main reason being that the way the FCC is deciding pole attachment complaint proceedings involving ILECs exposes electric utilities to significant liabilities because of refunds and the statute of limitations that the FCC is applying for those refunds. So right now the FCC is borrowing state statutes of limitation. We'd like the FCC to adopt a uniform 2-year federal statute of limitations under Section 415B of the Communications Act. We're also asking that the FCC clarify that no refunds would be provided for any period prior to, prior to good faith notice of a dispute between parties. We think that the FCC policy that allows for these refunds to be awarded for periods prior to the good faith notice basically encourages gamesmanship and allows parties to basically inflate the amount of liability that would apply otherwise had they basically brought their disputes on a timely basis. So with that, I'll turn it over to Campbell and you can talk about state legislation.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I'll be brief here. I know the communication companies have definitely been hard at work at lobbying state governments. I know various state legislatures have passed pole attachment bills that would negatively affect utility companies as well as pole owners. However, we are monitoring all the situation that is going on in the states and will definitely keep y'all updated on any recent or any major developments.
Campbell.
And as far as policy division resolutions, that is a recurring item that we review every year. This year, it will be in the November timeframe. And why is that so important? Because UTC will take its direction on our advocacy positions from those PPD resolutions. The process is, in short, it will be discussed in the public policy division. The resolutions will be released in draft form and then will be voted on by the entire core membership at our annual meeting, which next year will be in May in Oklahoma. So I encourage everyone to join the public policy division and become engaged in those issues, so you have an opportunity to bring in your perspectives to move our association forward. And that brings us directly to another thing that the public policy division does. That we're looking at a bigger project every year that we can also potentially present at the annual conference. Just this year, for example, it would be a state level funding progress tracker. It's just an idea. We have several others. And in any event, I encourage everyone to submit abstracts for presentations for the 2022 UTC Telecom and Technology Conference, which will be held in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in May 2022. It's back to our regular schedule. In 2021, we had delayed it by 3 months because of pandemic, but we are back in business. And that brings us to UTC resources. You can have a very good opportunity to see everything that is going on in UTC by visiting our utc.org webpage. You can see what we're doing on the policy webpage, where we have our briefings, where we have our most recent filings, And we have special pages for the big topic items like pole attachment, utility broadband, and 6 gigahertz. So, Brett, for final words.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we thank you again for your participation and attention. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email to any one of us, and we'll be able to answer whatever questions and help you with, FCC and other related issues by virtue of us being full-time on staff, on your behalf. So with that, we'll open it up for questions and we'll go off recording. Thanks, everybody.